What's going on, gamers? Today we're back with some more Outriders Worldslayer. What I'll be bringing you today is my endgame version of the Pyromancer build just here, the Heatseeker. So if you want a build that can kind of take out adds very fast, clear content really well and easy, and do some great boss damage, then stay tuned. That's coming up next. Welcome back everyone. Today we're going to be jumping straight into this Heatseeker gear set and just how truly awesome the new Heatseeker builds can be for the Pyromancers. As always, if you enjoy the content then a like would be much appreciated, and if you'd like to become a member of the channel for more content such as this and other gaming, then why not hit that subscribe and bell icon. But for today we're going to be looking at the build and just how good it is for clearing content and having a lot of fun. Now before I go into the full build and the gear and what you're going to need, I'm going to chuck on a little bit of gameplay and hopefully you'll be able to see whether this is the build for you. Right, so here we have everything on our character at the moment, and I have to say, this is my favourite build that I've ever made. I really enjoy playing this, just a lot of fun, and really easy to use. What we're going for, we're trying to get our anomaly power as high as possible. We're trying to make sure we can clear those enemy adds, like the basics and such, very fast, but also have enough damage about ourselves in order to clear those elites and those bosses really easy. So for our main weapon, we're going to be using the Mythos. This is just an out and out amazing weapon, easy to use, and it works perfect in this build. It's also got armor pierce on it, which works hand in hand with some other stuff later on. For the mods on it, you're going to keep Omen on, which is going to give you that bleed effect, absolutely amazing, gives you a little bit of extra damage, and it means you're going to be able to get 10% extra damage on whatever you hit with that blast that comes out of the gun. For our second, we're going to be using Fortress. Another great one for any anomaly build, 20% extra damage, gives us a nice chunky bit of armor and resistance, works hand in hand with what we've got in our skill tree in order to make ourselves very survivable. Shots increase your current armor and resistance by 5% and stacks up to 3 times. At maximum stacks, which is pretty much always, you don't have to crit, you don't have to do anything, just aim at the enemy, usually the bosses and such, and shoot away for a little while, and then you're going to get 20% extra damage to them for 10 seconds as well. Last but definitely not least, and probably the best one that you have to have on pretty much any anomaly build at the moment if you want some high damage, and that's Mage's Rage. Critical shots grant a 10% anomaly power bonus for 15 seconds and stacks up to 4 times. Meaning make sure you get 4 of those crit shots and you're going to have 40% increased your anomaly power. Bit of a no-brainer in pretty much any anomaly build in order to get the most damage out of it. Now another one I've only recently started using, this hasn't brought much to the table yet, but I'll show you why I'm going to put it on later, but at the moment it does put some dots on them and it manages to make the fights a little bit easier because they're weakened. So Emerald Chaos gives us noxious spawns, they're going to do a little bit of damage to the enemy but it's going to apply toxic. Ravenous Locust again applies some damage over time effects and it's going to apply weakness. And Firestorm means that the enemy is going to be constantly burning and it's going to apply damage, a nice high damage over time effect again. This is your swap 2 weapon. Take all of your shots with this, build up your crits in order to make the Mage's Rage proc, get your Omen on the enemy to get the 10% extra damage, and you're going to get the extra armor and resistances if you want to apply more debuffs and you want to apply more status effects, then you're going to go straight over to this one. I haven't actually been using this much in battles because I'm missing a mod, but if you did have that mod on, this would be absolutely amazing as a swap to weapon. Now for your pistol, honestly, put on whatever you think looks the coolest. If you want to put something on that's got vulnerable on it to apply that as well, you very much can do. I don't really find myself needing to or swapping to this, so it's completely your call. Just over to our gear, and we're kicking it off with the Ronin's Amagasa. This is probably one of my favourite pieces of gear in the game for the Anomaly builds at the moment, because it has a lot of what you're looking for. Anomaly Power, cooldown reduction and status power is amazing for pretty much any build for the Pyromancer, and it bops straight on with that tier 3 arms and anomaly. Critical shots increase your anomaly power by a massive amount. Obviously it goes up, it goes down depending on your level, but an absolutely huge amount for 6 seconds with a 6-second cooldown. Make sure you're getting those crit shots on those elites or those bosses, and you're really going to notice this, because I think it's probably the highest anomaly power you can get on a mod currently. Just underneath that, and we've got Tainted Blood. Increase the damage dealt to enemies afflicted with bleed by 16%. We're going to have that constantly up. We're hitting those shots with our Omen mod, meaning we've got 16% extra damage at all times, probably mainly to those elites again, because the others are going to get nuked before that. And lastly, Anomaly and Echo. Grants a nice amount of firepower and a nice amount of anomaly power bonus on skill activation, and lasts for 6 seconds. This is pretty much constantly on your build because you're going to be activating skills all the time, meaning you've got a nice chunky bit of anomaly damage. We don't really worry too much about the firepower. It does help a tiny bit, but we're not going for that. We're just going for that extra anomaly. Just down from here, and our first piece of Heat Seekers is going to be the chest plate. Anomaly power, cooldown reduction and skills life leech. Means we've got a nice bit of health regen going on, a nice bit of cooldown, and anomaly power is pretty much key to the build. The tier 3 is Fire Trap, Thermal Bomb. Using the skill on a target marked or afflicted with burn creates an explosion dealing a certain amount, a pretty high amount of damage in a 4 meter radius. You 100% want to keep this on. This gives you a big old chunky number, especially with how many times we're using those thermal bombs. Really nice to see, and it means we clear content so fast with those smaller enemies. Captain Hunter, increase your damage against elites by 16%. This, again, hand in hand with the bleed one, gives us 32% now, which is massive for those really tough targets. And no resistance against the fortified. Increase your resistance piercing by 100% of your armor piercing value. Again, like I said, we've got armor pierce over here. You're going to want to max that out as much as you can. And we've got a little bit in our skill tree. It means we've got a nice bit of resistance piercing going on that build. Just down from here, and we've got the Heat Seeker Lex. Anomaly, cooldown and status power. Again, whenever we can get that status power, that's going to help us, mainly with our phaser beam, but also with our burn effect. I've put on the tier 3 branded Thermal Bomb. Enemies affected by the skill receive 30% more damage. That's just going to help us with those tougher enemies like the elites and the bosses. Everything else will also take that because of how many thermal bombs we've got, but they're probably going to explode anyway of how much damage we're doing. Fire Frenzy, Thermal Bomb, the skill can be activated one more time before triggering the cooldown. I think this one is really worth having with this build. If you've got an overheat, it's not quite as vital, but without it, having that extra bomb definitely works best, I find, especially when we're pairing it up with another mod and we're going to have more of the bombs going off. And lastly, this one's rolled with Wildfire. Thermal Bomb, the skill inflicts burn on every enemy damaged by the explosion. I originally wanted this to be the 40% one so that I could get a big old chunky area effect, but because of how I've worked this build, this one is actually ideal. Anything that's not killed by that explosion is now set on fire, and our fire does a ridiculous amount of damage, especially the higher up and the harder the enemies are to kill. Just down from here, and we've got the Heat Seeker's Gloves. Max health, skills life leech and status power. Now if I could find a purple glove with some of this stuff on, that would be ideal. I've not managed to yet. I'd then be able to swap it out for the anomaly, but we're going to have to wait for that further down the line. Anomaly, skill cooldown and status power would be ideal, but this still works perfect in order to give us a bit of survivability with our extra health and our skills leech. The tier mods on it, the tier 3 one is Double Fun. Thermal Bomb, the skill can affect 2 targets. Like I said, add clear, this is probably the fastest one in the game, and it makes running those expeditions or even Tarya Gratar just an absolute breeze. Now when you activate, it's going to go straight forward, it's going to hit the original target, one's going to peer off to the right or left, and it's going to go after another one. Because we've got 2 goes of it, it means there's a lot of explosions going off, and it's just a really fun thing to see as everything gets devastated. Even if they don't die, they may apply a burn to the next target because of the wildfire mod we've got. Those tend to fall over as well because of how much higher damage it does. True Blast, one you've probably got to have on, increases the explosion damage by 709,590. Just a big old chunky detonation. That alongside the tier 3, which also causes the explosion, means everything gets nuked, and it's so fun to watch. And lastly, we've got Pure Power. Increasing our phaser beam a little bit more, this increases the skill's damage by a set amount, 247 in this case, making our phaser beam our go-to boss nuking machine. So this is going to finish off our set bonus. After successful detonation, Thermal Bomb travels to the target with the lowest health in a 25 meter radius. Thermal Bomb applied this way deals 50% less damage and can chain up to 3 times. Because of the way this is set up, because of how much burn we've got going on in our build, and because of how devastating it actually is, this works out to clear a lot of ads very, very fast, and you have a lot of fun while you're doing it. Now for the boots, I've been searching for so long for these, I've had to chuck these on. They work absolutely amazing, but as you can see, I have a completely unused mod slot. This one comes with max health, status power and cooldown reduction. Self-medication, the tier 3, probably my favourite survival mod in the game ever. Even better I would say than Golem Effect, just for how good it is to use. Increase your max health by 10% when any skill starts its cooldown, and stacks up to 3 times, each stack lasting 5 seconds. This is your medkit. Whenever you're in trouble, if your health is low, pop one of your skills. If you've got more than one though, so say for example if we're using our Thermal Bomb, you have to use both of them as soon as it's on cooldown, then you're going to get the effect. It's going to regen your health completely up to full and bop 10% on top. This works perfect in any of those tricky situations, especially with our Ash Blast, which is kind of an instant pop, get your health back. Really helps you to keep yourself alive and not worry about those enemies in your face too much. Second slot, like I said, bullet absorption, nope, don't want it, not what we're after. I'll show you in just a second what we are after. Reason I've got this on, it gives max health, status power is what we're after a lot of, and cooldown reduction. And it rolled with unstoppable force. We definitely need this in that build, increases your anomaly power by 50% of your resistance piercing. We have got a lot of resistance pierce going on, your anomaly power jumps through the roof because of this, and it works hand in hand with that one just there, increase your resistance piercing by 100% of your armor piercing. We've got a lot of resistance piercing going on in our skill tree, makes this probably a must-have on this build. But like I said, if I could switch it out, I have had over 50, 60, maybe 70 pairs of these and never found a good one, and that's just over here, the Heat Seeker's boots. The reason you're going to have this, it's got bullet kindling on it, you want to have that. You also do not want what I've got down the bottom there, which is even the odds. Ideal, I would say probably if you are switching over to this one, would be a Euthanizer, giving you 16% extra damage, and then you'd be able to put the other mod up the top there, the Unstoppable Force. I think really good rolled in that bottom one, could work perfect in this build. It's just down to a bit of luck. I have had absolutely none with boots, I've had a nightmare of them for ages, so I've had to adapt the build a little bit. So jumping over to the skills, Thermal Bomb, Thermal Bomb, Thermal Bomb. If you're using a Heat Seeker set and you're not using this, don't use the Heat Seeker set, pretty much that simple. You're going to launch these at whenever there's a mass of enemies, whenever there's a boss, whenever there's an elite, you're going to make sure you're hitting them, just for the fact it's going to allow you to get that 30% extra damage on them anyway. Everything is going to pop. This does so much damage. You've got the blast from it as well, and you've got just how hard the actual explosion hits, followed by wildfire, which sets everything on fire. Such a fun one to see as the map pretty much clears itself. Over here, and this one is Ash Blast, we have to use Ash Blast completely different to probably every other build. A lot of times you're going to want to have the mod on that gives you the extra damage from your anomaly and firepower when you're hitting them with Ash Blast. I didn't want to use that because we're doing a burn build. Everything's burning, it's constantly on fire. If it's not, you'll probably struggle because you want that regen, and it gives us loads and loads of damage. In fact, the fun thing about this build is that when you start going into those higher tiers, your burn actually takes over everything else you're doing because of how much health they've got, because of the ticks. Your burn, I've seen it go up to about 13, 14, maybe even 15 million tick damage at the moment with my burn. So what you want to do, use Ash Blast on any of the enemies that surround you. That's not going to matter too much, but when you get to those either tough elites or mainly the boss, you want to make sure you're not applying Ash Blast to it. Make sure you're staying slightly further back, as you do not want to be applying this Ash Blast to those. It's just for the increase to your damage. Jumping over to our phaser beam, this hits ridiculously hard. Considering we've not really been speccing into it too much, it does a lot of damage, and I mean 10s, 20s, 30s, 40s, upwards millions when you hit those targets. The one thing you've got to remember as well, with this, I haven't put it on where it's got the extra added radius. If you did want to put that in a build, you very well could do, but I didn't need it because we were clearing that ad so fast. But this is going to be your boss nuke, elite nuke, whatever you need to fall over nuke. And don't forget, because it does a little blast around yourself, if you want to be in amongst everything, you can use this and they're all going to fall over as well. Really high single target damage, and that's why we've got it on, helping us take our bosses that fast. Right, so jumping over to the skill tree, I'll try and get through this as fast as possible. Extra damage for your anomaly power, just over here, extra damage against marked targets, absolutely perfect whenever you can pick that up, make sure you do. More anomaly, more marked targets, just over here, more anomaly power, another 10%. I would love to have gone all the way over here to pick this up, but it wasn't possible. So from there we've popped up, we've got increase your damage by 20% against enemies below 30% of health. This works really well as you start to make your way up those apocalypse tiers. And once you're hitting the 35s, 36, all up to 40s, you're really going to notice the increased damage from this. Just up from here, we've managed to grab a little bit of health, but we're mainly using it to go all the way up the top. The moment burn ends on an enemy, inflict Ash status. Do not worry about that, they're not going to ever stop burning unless you put them out yourself with those Ash clads. Just up from here, almost completely wasted on us, but we do need to go this way, and that's increase your weapon damage by 10% against marked enemies. You're not going to notice this in the slightest, but we have to get to this node right here, hot situation. Activating your immobilize skills increases your anomaly power by 45% for 10 seconds. That is just something you've got to take advantage of in this build. I know a lot of people are probably going to go down the bottom tree and go that way to try and get your thermal bomb damage up. This works just as good in my opinion, except for the fact now we can bop into that middle tree and we've got an absolute abundance of extra regen, a lot easier for our survivability, and we don't really have to worry about much. Just down from here, go into the middle branch again. I've picked this one. If you're struggling for health or survivability, bop straight down here and pick up your resistances. If you're not, chuck this on and you'll clear the content faster. Increase your weapon damage and anomaly power by 5%. A little bit more health. Just over here, a little bit of skill leech. A little bit more health. A little bit more skill leech, making us very survivable. Just up the top here, and we've got activating ignite skills, increases your armor by 45% for 10 seconds. Again, pretty much constantly up. We've got a low enough cooldown on all of our skills to not worry about it, and you've got 45% extra armor pretty much at all times, which helps with that damage negation. Just over from here, fuel for the embers, double skill leech when under 30% of max health. Just means if you're in trouble, you should be getting a lot more regen from your ticks on burn, and again, survivability very high. Enemies afflicted by burn receive 15% more damage, trial by fire. You have to pick this one up because 15% is just a really big increase, and like I said, constantly on fire, well worth having, and it's going to improve your tick damage as well. Last but definitely not least, activating ignite skills increases your armor piercing by 45% and resistance piercing by 45% for 10 seconds. You have this up almost constantly again, keep using your phaser beam, and it's going to work hand in hand with the two mods we've got on our gear set, boosting our stats massively. Now over to the Pax Tree, and this is the fun part where everyone has probably completely done the opposite to me. The first thing I did, and for a long time, I bopped down to this bottom tree, which is by far the best for this. If you're using guns, probably bop up the top. If you're going to be using that anomaly power, down the bottom is key. But what I did, melting point, increase your resistance piercing by 15% when above 80% health and by 30% when 40% health. This is going to help us with everything we've got going on, meaning you've got a little bit more resistance pierce. Down from here and Master Exploder. Our explosive skills now hit like an absolute truck, making you able to clear everything on the map very fast, very easy, and have some nice runs. Just over from here, reduce all skill cooldowns by 4 seconds when all skills are on cooldown, with a 3-second cooldown. This just comes into effect so much, and again it makes us able to get our skills out fast. From here up until recently, I always went down the bottom. Your anomaly power is increased by 30% for every skill on cooldown. Absolutely amazing, works massively, means your thermal bombs hit so hard, as does everything you do. After that, you'd probably go on to trigger sequence. Activating an explosive skill increases the damage of the next explosive skill by 25%. These are good, really good, but I think this way that I've gone now works a lot better. So if we pop up, increase your status power by 15% for every enemy afflicted with burn, and stacks up to 5 times. Now you would think that you're only going to be going this way if you're using that multi-target, pretty much going to clear the content, but it's not going to help you on bosses. It's the complete opposite, I found, because of this last node. Increase your burn duration by 500%, and each consecutive burn tick on an enemy deals 10% more damage. Now, as the enemies start having more health, as the bosses, so that last Arbiter for example, has more health, especially if you're playing in 2s and 3 players, the amount of extra stuff they have on them because of those apocalypse tiers is huge. It really is, and the longer the battle, the more this takes effect. I have already seen upwards of, I think, 14-15 million damage per tick on that burn, and in those 3-player ones it becomes my biggest damage source by an absolute mile. If I remember correctly, last time it was well over 1 billion. Try and get yourself as much status power as possible, try and get those burn effects going off, and like I said, do not be applying that Ashclad to the boss. Make sure you're further back away from him, and you'll notice this significantly. Also, it's going to apply to everything else on the map. If they haven't blown up, they're going to be on fire because of your wildfire, and they're going to burn to death as well. Really nice tree to use, and one that I think is probably underrated because I've only just started using it myself as well. For your Ascension Points, pretty much make sure you're taking this right here, Anomaly Power, as much as possible. Pop straight over to Anomaly Damage, and from there you're going to want Status Power, Resistance Piercing, and just down here Armor Piercing. Those are going to be your key ones, and if you can, spec into your elite over here, as that's going to make sure all of the tougher targets take the extra damage as well. Also, just over here, cooldown reduction is going to make things much easier if you want to spam your skills. But with this setup, you're able to use them very often anyway, but this will just make things a little bit easier, and of course you'll be able to get that healing off a little bit faster if you need it. Right, you gamers, hopefully that's helped a few of you out. Remember, you have got that extra mod slot, so if you're struggling for survivability, I don't think you will do with this, but chuck on something like a damage absorber and you'll be completely golden. This can work on every single apocalypse tier and scenario because of the survivability, because of the regen, and because of your higher armor, and you've got a lot of damage and ad clear going on as well. Probably my favourite build I've ever made, and looks like a cool kind of burning Ronin as well, so can't go wrong. As always gamers, for all things gaming, for all things Xbox, take care. I'll see you on the next day.